You are too smart to be understood, and that is exactly why people around you feel uncomfortable. Not because you are arrogant. Not because you try to prove anything. Not because you tried to make anyone feel small. Just because your mind runs on a different frequency than theirs. Here is something almost no one tells you. Intelligence does not connect you to people, it often does the opposite. The sharper your mind gets, the smaller your circle becomes. That is not a flaw in you. It is a mechanism Carl Jung described almost a century ago, and it still explains, with brutal precision, why the smartest person in the room is usually the loneliest one too. Have you ever explained something as simply as you possibly could, watched the confusion on the other person's face and realized the problem was never how you said it? If you have ever left a conversation feeling like you were speaking a language no one else understood, you already know what this feels like. Maybe it was a family dinner where your honest answer landed like a slap, when all you did was say what you actually thought. Maybe it was a job where your ideas moved faster than the room could follow, and instead of being welcomed, they were quietly resented. None of that was random. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why it happens and what to do with it. Let's be clear about what this video is not. This is not a video telling you that you are too smart for people. That kind of flattery is cheap and it keeps you stuck because it hands you a compliment instead of an explanation. This is a video about a real psychological structure, mapped out by Carl Jung, that explains why perceptive, independent minds get read as strange, cold, or too much by the people around them. Jung called it psychological type. And once you understand your type, and the part of your mind you never learned to use, the isolation stops feeling like a mystery. It starts feeling like information. Information you can actually use instead of a wound you keep quietly explaining away. Jung spent decades studying why people who think alike get along, and why people who think differently clash without even meaning to. His answer became one of his most practical contributions: psychological type. Jung proposed that every mind organizes reality through 4 functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Thinking asks, does this make logical sense? Feeling asks, what is this worth to me? Sensation asks, what is actually here, right now, in front of me? Intuition asks, where is this going, what does it mean beneath the surface? Jung laid this system out in 1921 in a book called Psychological Types, and it came from years of watching patients and colleagues clash over things that were never really about facts at all. They were about which function each mind trusted first. Every person leans on one of these as their dominant function, the one that runs automatically, almost like a native language. But here is the part most people never learn. Whichever function sits opposite your dominant one becomes what Jung called the inferior function. Underdeveloped, clumsy, and almost embarrassing to use. If your dominant function is intuition, chasing patterns, possibilities, and meaning, your inferior function is likely sensation, the plain, concrete, here and now world most people live in without effort. This is the part clinicians who work with Jung's typology still see today. A person can read a room's underlying dynamics in seconds, and still forget where they left their keys 5 minutes ago. To other people, that gap looks like arrogance or distraction or not caring about normal things. It is neither. It is a mind spending most of its energy on a function most people barely use, while neglecting the one function most people rely on to feel normal. Think about the last time someone called you, in your head, too much, or said you overanalyze everything. That was not an insult about your character. That was someone describing, without knowing it, the exact shape of your psychological type, and the exact reason you don't fit the room the way they do. Maybe you can map an entire family's unspoken dynamics in a single dinner, and still stand there forgetting to eat, because the plain, physical moment in front of you was never where your attention lived. That is not carelessness. That is a dominant function doing exactly what it was built to do, at the cost of the one function it left behind. So here is the first thing to sit with. You are not misunderstood because something is wrong with you. You are misunderstood because your dominant function and their dominant function are running 2 different operating systems, and neither one is broken. But type is only the surface of this. There is a second layer underneath it, one Jung considered far more dangerous to ignore, and it is the real reason some minds end up alone. Before we go there, this is worth pausing on. If any of this is already reframing how you see yourself, don't just keep watching, do something with it right now. Down in the comments, write one word. The word that describes who you are becoming, not who you have been. Hold on to that word because this video is going to come back for it later and you will need it. And while you're there, subscribe because the part of this most people never talk about is coming up next. Now, back to the mechanism. That second layer is this. Intelligence and consciousness are not the same thing, and modern culture still gets that distinction wrong constantly. Intelligence is processing power. Pattern recognition, memory, speed, the ability to solve problems quickly. Consciousness, in the Jungian sense, is something else entirely. It is the capacity to see yourself, your motives, your blind spots, the parts of you that you would rather not look at. A person can be brilliant and still be almost completely unconscious of why they act the way they do. Jung worked with exactly this pattern for decades. Highly capable people, successful by every external measure, who had never once turned that intelligence back on themselves. Their minds were sharp weapons pointed outward, at problems, at other people, at the world, and never inward. You can spot this pattern everywhere once you know what you are looking for. The executive who can restructure an entire company in a weekend, and still cannot explain why every close relationship in his life ends the same way. The student who can out-argue any professor in the room, and still cannot sit alone in silence for 10 minutes without reaching for a distraction. Sharp outward and almost blind inward. That combination is far more common than most people assume. It explains why some of the most impressive people you know are also, quietly, some of the most stuck. This is why a genuinely intelligent person can still repeat the same painful pattern for 20 years. Intelligence alone does not interrupt a pattern. Only consciousness does that. The willingness to look at the pattern honestly instead of just outsmarting its symptoms. Jung had a name for the tangled emotional knot that keeps a pattern running underneath a person's awareness. A complex, an old wound wired to a strong feeling that hijacks behavior the moment it gets touched. A brilliant strategist at work can still lose all composure the instant a complex from childhood gets brushed, because intelligence does not disarm a complex. It just gets recruited to defend it faster and more convincingly than anyone else in the room could manage. This is why some of the smartest people you know are also the hardest to have a certain conversation with. Their intelligence is not protecting the truth. It is protecting an old wound, dressed up in very good arguments. So when someone calls you smart, understand what they are actually seeing and what they are missing. They are seeing your processing speed. They are not seeing whether you have done the harder work, turning that same sharpness on your own unconscious material. That harder work is quiet, and it does not perform well in a room. No one applauds you for noticing your own defensiveness. No one congratulates you for catching yourself mid-pattern and choosing deliberately not to repeat it. But that invisible work is precisely what separates a fast mind from an awake one. And this matters because the isolation we are talking about in this video is not caused by raw intelligence. It is caused by consciousness, by seeing what most people have not chosen to see yet. Think of the last room you were in where everyone nodded along to something that felt quietly untrue to you. You were not slower than them. You were simply awake to something they had agreed, without discussing it, not to look at. And once you see what the room has agreed not to see, you find out fast how a group treats the ones who wake up first. Here is how a group treats the one who wakes up first. Jung borrowed a term from anthropology to describe something he saw constantly in his patients, and in society at large: participation mystique. It describes a state where a person's sense of self is not fully separate from the group. Their identity, their beliefs, even their emotional reactions, are borrowed from the collective, absorbed without ever being examined. Most people live here, and it is not a moral failure, it is the psychologically default setting for a mind that has never been forced to separate from the herd. Jung connected this fused state to what he called the collective unconscious, the shared layer of the psyche running beneath individual awareness, full of inherited patterns or archetypes that shape how groups think and feel without anyone choosing it consciously. Inside participation mystique, a person is not just agreeing with the group. They are, psychologically, borrowing pieces of their own identity from it. Ask someone deep inside participation mystique what they believe about anything important, and watch how quickly the answer turns into what everyone believes. That slide from "I think" to "everyone thinks" is the fingerprint of the fusion Jung was describing. Inside participation mystique, safety comes from agreement. If everyone around you believes the same thing, feels the same way, reacts the same way, that sameness feels like proof you are safe. Now picture what happens when one person in that group starts thinking independently. Not loudly. Not aggressively. Just differently. To the group, that difference does not register as an interesting opinion. It registers as a threat to the shared identity holding everyone together. This is why the same joke told by an insider gets laughs and told by the different one gets a cold silence. It was never about the content of what was said. It was about who was allowed to say it without breaking the illusion of sameness the room depends on. This is why a simple, honest observation from you can trigger a reaction wildly out of proportion to what you actually said. You are not being attacked for being wrong. You are being attacked for stepping outside the fusion the group depends on to feel stable. Jung watched this dynamic play out again and again. The individual who differentiates from the mass is rarely thanked for it in the moment. They are usually punished for it first and understood later, if at all. Look at any workplace, any friend group, any family. The person who says the uncomfortable, accurate thing out loud is rarely thanked in that moment. They are labeled negative, dramatic, or difficult. Right up until years later when everyone quietly admits they were right. So the isolation you feel is not a sign that something is wrong with your thinking. It is the exact, predictable cost of no longer needing the group's agreement to feel like yourself. But group rejection is not even the deepest layer of this. There is something underneath it that is far more personal than loyalty to the group, and it is about to get uncomfortable. Here it is. Jung believed the deepest human fear was not death. It was truth, specifically, the truth that threatens the identity someone has spent their whole life building. Most people are not attached to their beliefs because those beliefs are accurate. They are attached because those beliefs hold their sense of self together. Take away the belief and for a moment they do not know who they are. This is why facts alone rarely change a person's mind, and why a well-reasoned argument from you can somehow make things worse, not better. The better your logic, the more efficiently it dismantles the story someone is depending on to feel stable. So instead of gratitude, you get resistance, sometimes even hostility, aimed directly at the person who was simply telling the truth. You are not just offering information. You are threatening the scaffolding underneath their identity, whether you intend to or not. Jung saw this in his clinical work constantly. Patients would defend a clearly self-destructive pattern with more energy than they defended almost anything else in their lives, because giving it up meant admitting a version of themselves had been wrong. And admitting that feels, to the nervous system, dangerously close to psychological death. This is why the same person can calmly discuss almost anything, and then go rigid, defensive, or cold the instant one specific subject comes up. That reaction is not about the subject. It is a complex firing, a buried wound standing guard over an identity it is terrified of losing. This is the part that will change how you interpret every future conflict with people close to you. When someone reacts explosively to something true you said calmly, they are usually not defending the idea. They are defending the self-image built on top of that idea. And once you see that clearly, you stop taking the reaction personally, and start seeing it for what it actually is, fear wearing the mask of anger. This does not mean you stop speaking the truth. It means you finally understand what actually happens when you do, and you stop mistaking someone else's fear for evidence that you were wrong. So where does that fear usually go once it can't be pointed inward? It gets pointed at you. Straight at the nearest person who reminds them of what they buried, through a mechanism Jung called shadow projection, and it is one of the most important concepts he ever developed. The shadow is everything about ourselves we have rejected, repressed, or refused to look at, our own darkness, our own weakness, our own unlived potential. Because it is too uncomfortable to own directly, the mind does something clever and cruel. It projects that rejected material onto someone else, usually someone who reminds them of exactly what they have buried. Here is the part that will land hard if you have ever been called cold, arrogant, or too intense for simply being honest. People often are not reacting to what you actually did. They are reacting to what you represent to their unconscious. If you think independently, and they have spent years suppressing their own independent thought to stay safe inside the group, your clarity does not read to them as neutral. It reads as an accusation even though you never made one. A coworker who quietly gave up on an old ambition may feel a flash of irritation, not admiration, when they watch you pursue yours without apologizing for it. That irritation is not about you. It is the sound of their own unlived life, brushing up against the reminder that it is still possible. Jung's own break from Freud in 1913 is a well-documented example of exactly this dynamic playing out at the highest level. As Jung began developing ideas that diverged from the group consensus around him, the response was not curiosity, it was rejection, sharp enough to end the relationship. Differentiation, even when it is quiet and respectful, tends to get punished by the very people closest to it. Jung himself was labeled disloyal, ungrateful, even dangerous by people who had once called him a favorite student. Not because his ideas were cruel. Because his ideas no longer fit inside the shape the group needed him to stay in. If it happened to the man who mapped this entire mechanism, it was never going to skip you. So if you have been labeled difficult for simply not going along with something that didn't sit right with you, consider this. That label may say far more about what the other person has not yet faced in themselves than it says about you. This is uncomfortable to hear, and it is also, according to Jung, one of the most liberating things you can understand about human conflict. Once you stop absorbing every projection thrown at you, you free up an enormous amount of energy you used to spend defending yourself against accusations that were never really about you in the first place. Which leads directly into the process underneath all of this. The one Jung considered the entire point of a human life. Remember that word you wrote down earlier? This is where we come back for it. Jung called it individuation, and it is, in his own framing, the central task of a human life. It is the slow, often uncomfortable process of becoming who you actually are, underneath everyone else's expectations of who you should be. To understand it, you need two concepts Jung placed at the center of this process: the persona and the self. The persona is the mask, the socially acceptable version of you, built to fit into family, work, culture, whatever role you were handed. It is not fake exactly. It is necessary up to a point. But Jung warned that most people never take the mask off, they eventually forget it was ever a mask at all, and they mistake it for their actual identity. The self is something deeper. Jung described it as the archetype of wholeness, the fullest, most complete version of who you actually are, including the parts the persona was built to hide. Individuation is the process of closing the gap between the two, between the performance and the person underneath it. Jung considered the self an archetype in its own right, not something you invent, but something you uncover, the same way you uncover a shape buried under years of other people's expectations. This is slow work, and it rarely announces itself with a single dramatic moment. It shows up as small refusals, declining a role you used to play automatically, saying the honest thing instead of the comfortable one, noticing a mask slip and choosing not to fix it back into place. It also shows up in what stops interesting you. Conversations that used to hold your attention for hours suddenly feel thin. Achievements that used to matter enormously start to feel quietly beside the point. That is not depression, and it is not ingratitude. That is the self, slowly outgrowing the container the persona built for it. Give that outgrowing room instead of fighting it, and the loneliness starts to feel less like loss and more like space. And here is the part almost no one warns you about before it happens to you. Individuation is, almost without exception, a lonely process. As you become less identified with the mask that made you legible to everyone around you, some of those people stop recognizing you. Not because you changed for the worse. Because you stopped playing the role that made the relationship comfortable for them. This is why so many genuinely awakened, self-aware people describe a strange grief in the middle of their own growth, missing relationships that required a version of them that no longer exists. That grief is real. And it is also, according to Jung, one of the clearest signs that individuation is actually working. You are not losing people because you broke something. You are losing the version of the relationship that only worked because you were still wearing the mask they recognized. Some of those relationships will survive the change, once the other person adjusts to who you actually are. Some will not, and that is not a tragedy even though it feels like one at first. It is simply evidence that the connection was built on the persona, and never had access to the self underneath it. So that word you wrote down earlier in this video, hold it up next to your life right now and ask yourself honestly, how much of your daily existence is persona and how much is self? The gap between those two answers is usually exactly where your loneliness is coming from. But close that gap even a little, and something happens that almost no one warns you about. Here is the part of this that turns discomfort into something closer to power. Once you stop needing the group's agreement to feel like yourself, something shifts permanently. You become far harder to manipulate. Manipulation in almost every form depends on one thing: your need for approval, belonging, or certainty from outside yourself. Take that need away, and most manipulation simply has nothing left to grip onto. Think about the tactics that used to work on you. The silent treatment that once made you scramble to fix things, even when you had done nothing wrong. The vague disapproval that once sent you rewriting your own opinions just to restore the peace. Those tactics are not magic. They are levers, and every lever needs something on the other end willing to move. This is not a small side effect. This is, according to Jung's framework, one of the most practical results of individuation, and one of the most threatening things about it to the people around you who still operate from participation mystique. An independent mind cannot be easily herded, guilt, or shamed back into line, because it no longer needs the line to feel safe. Guilt trips stop working because they depend on your fear of disapproval. Shaming stops working because it depends on your fear of exclusion. Even flattery loses its grip because it depends on your hunger for external validation. A hunger individuation slowly, quietly starves out. But understand the price attached to this, because Jung never pretended there wasn't one. The same clarity that makes you immune to manipulation is the clarity that costs you effortless belonging. You trade the comfort of fitting in for the freedom of not needing to. Most people never make that trade, not because they can't, but because the fear of standing alone is, for most of a human life, stronger than the pull toward truth. It takes a strange kind of courage to keep seeing clearly when clear sight keeps costing you comfort. Jung did not describe this as an easy path, and neither will this video. He described it as the only path that eventually leads somewhere real. You already know which side of that trade you are living on. And here is the part worth sitting with. The people who resent you for making this trade are almost never the people who understand it. They are the people who are still deciding, quietly, whether they are brave enough to make it themselves. The question this video keeps circling back to is simple. Now that you can name the mechanism, what are you going to do with that clarity? Let's put the whole mechanism back together in one line. Your type gave you a mind built differently from most of the people around you. Your consciousness lets you see what participation mystique keeps most people from ever questioning. That seeing threatens identities built on unexamined belief, which is why the truth gets met with fear instead of curiosity. That fear gets projected onto you as coldness, arrogance, or distance when it was never really about you at all. And underneath all of it, individuation has been quietly pulling you away from the mask and closer to the self. None of this makes you better than the people who haven't walked this path yet. Jung was explicit about this, and it matters. The goal was never superiority, it was wholeness. The moment lucidity turns into contempt for other people, you have not individuated, you have simply built a new persona, a colder one, and called it enlightenment. Watch for that trap specifically, because a mind like yours is exactly the kind that can fall into it without noticing. If you catch yourself feeling superior to the people still asleep inside participation mystique, pause. That feeling is not wisdom. It is the ego borrowing the language of individuation to build itself a new, more sophisticated mask. Real clarity does not need an audience, and it does not need anyone else to be lesser for it to be true. It also does not need to isolate itself completely, cutting off every relationship as proof of how awake it has become. Jung was not describing a hermit's path. He was describing a wider, steadier way of standing in the world, one that can hold a crowded room and a quiet mind at the same time. So here is the choice this video keeps returning you to, the one you cannot outsource to anyone else. You can keep shrinking your own perception to make the room comfortable, or you can let the room be uncomfortable and stay exactly as awake as you actually are. Comfort or truth? You already know which one has been quietly costing you your whole life. And you already know, underneath every excuse you have made for shrinking yourself, which one you actually want to choose from here forward. If this described exactly what you have been feeling and could never explain, that is not a coincidence. Subscribe, because this channel exists for minds like yours. Stop apologizing for a mind that was never the problem.